Welcome. I'm Rogers Anderson, Williamson County's mayor, and as we travel around the county today to look at our different departments, the different events, things that are going on in our county, we've invited our planner, Williamson County's planner, Mike Matteson, to be down with us and discuss some issues. Thanks for being with us today.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
I've learned over the years when I do this show, people look at you and they look at me and they want to know a little bit about who you are and how'd you ever get started, and was this the career path you chose when you were in middle school?
Right.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've been with us.
Okay. Well, I'm Mike Matteson, the planning director for the county, of course, and I've been here for 11 years now. Boy, it's kind of flown by, but it's been 11 years. And no, I didn't always want to be a planner. Of course, as a kid, I wanted to be a professional athlete, and that didn't pan out. But
any particular team?
Tennessee Vols, of course. But growing up, I was fortunate to live in a lot of different places, and so that experience kind of showed me the difference between cities, and I became interested in how different cities develop and that sort of thing. So actually went to high school here in Williamson County at Brentwood High School, and then off to Tennessee, was going to be an architect initially. But then somewhere along the way, I decided that I wanted to take a more of a kind of a big picture approach rather than looking at individual buildings, and so planning became a real interest for me.
So on a daily basis here in Williamson County, and we kind of have, for the audience, we kind of have to separate when people come in to see you about different topics. You're not looking at Brentwood, you're not looking at Franklin, you're only looking at those unincorporated areas.
That's right, yeah, everything that's not in one of the municipalities.
And so when people are talking to you about issues, how do you decide that? Do you have some kind of zoning or planning program you follow?
We do. Our office covers the unincorporated portions of the county, and the main fundamental for our planning program is the county's comprehensive plan. So there's a comprehensive plan that was adopted in 2007 that outlines the policies with regard to how the unincorporated areas should grow and develop over time. So that's more of a policy document, and then to support that policy document and help implement it, the county has adopted a zoning ordinance and some subdivision regulations that outline basically the rules for development.
You know, and a lot of people don't realize that all of the comprehensive land plan really wasn't just something you pulled off the shelf. It's many years. We had one, we modified, changed it, fix things, tweak them if you may use. Yeah. But all of that goes through many, many vetting processes.
Right.
Public hearings. And the zoning, likewise.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just a matter of what you or your department wants, but it's what our citizens and our county commissioners have voted on with staff, you and others, saying this is how it should look. And we actually hire outside consultants to help us from time to time.
That's right. So when we updated the comprehensive plan in 2007, we had a consultant firm helping us with that. And the end result of that plan was the product of significant public participation, as you said. In fact, I think we had probably about a dozen public meetings trying to get input during that process. We had a citizens group of about 180 people that became very involved, and of course the County Commission and Planning Commission were heavily involved as well.
I think it's also important to note that not every county in the state of Tennessee have land plan uses, zoning. In fact, I'm not sure the latest number, but probably less than half of them have those types of plans. And some people that come in to see you and come to see me probably prefer not to have them. They could just put anything there. But at the end of the day, it's if we're investing our time and money as an individual, as a taxpayer, in building our home, a house that becomes our home, then we'd kind of like to know what the neighbors can and can't do next door to us, Mike.
Exactly. Yeah, you know, Williamson County is such a special place, as you know, and so I think the fundamental principle behind planning is to kind of figure out what is important about a community, what makes it a special place, and then design your regulations so as to help accentuate what makes it special in the first place, and then safeguard against things that would detract from that.
Although we have individuals that come into your department from time to time that are single home, they just want a single home. They're not looking at a subdivision. But the majority of your work involves subdivisions in the unincorporated area, and that's kind of our discussion today. One of those elements that goes into, that you go into in a subdivision, how does it impact the community, the roads? There are many, many elements that go into approving a subdivision or ultimately a piece of land to be developed in a certain way. And one of those things that you look at and rely on very heavily is the traffic pattern and how many cars that puts on a road.
Exactly.
So kind of tell us what the current model is and then a little bit about where we're going.
Yeah, so you're right. When we evaluate a subdivision and when we're kind of bringing it through the review and approval process, we look at it to make sure that it meets all of the requirements that are outlined in the zoning ordinance and subregs, and part of those requirements relate to traffic issues. The county has a couple of mechanisms by which we try to make sure during that process that when we approve a subdivision, the infrastructure, the roadway infrastructure in this case, is either already there or will be there in the future to help to accommodate that development. So we use a couple of different mechanisms, and I won't go into a great deal of detail, but essentially we would either essentially we would evaluate the impact that a development will have on the surrounding roadway network, and if there's not sufficient capacity on those roads to handle it, we'll either require the developer to scale back the development to a level that can be accommodated, or we'll require them to do a full-blown traffic study that identifies deficiencies and recommends improvements to the roadway network. So that's a model that the county has used for many years. It's similar to what a lot of places use, and I think in many ways it's effective, but Williamson County, particularly the unincorporated area, is kind of a different animal than some other places. Williamson County, the unincorporated areas, we get a lot of pass-through traffic, as you know, from other areas because large areas of Williamson County are located kind of right in between fast-growing communities like Franklin and Nolensville and Spring Hill, Murfreesboro, and then heavy employment centers in Cool Springs and Brentwood and Nashville. We get a lot of traffic on our county roads that begins somewhere else and ends up somewhere else. So you've got that coupled with the growth that we're experiencing in the county, and some of those tools that we use begin to break down a little bit. And so we've been kind of in a situation where we're hearing from the community, we're hearing from leaders about traffic and concerns about the impact that traffic has on the quality of life that people have. And so we've concluded fairly recently with under your leadership to kind of take a step back and bring in some folks to help look at those traffic issues and study it, and then make some recommendations on how we can best manage traffic in the future.
So far, we've had a couple of public meetings on this new model that we're looking at, trying to gather information. And how will this new model kind of differ from what we've currently got if we decide to go that way?
Yeah, well, we have had a couple of public meetings thus far, and we'll have some more as this unfolds. Right now it may be a little too early to know exactly what the results are going to be, but essentially, we've hired the consultants to come in and do three basic things. We want them to evaluate our current traffic conditions, make some projections on what it will be like in the future, and then most importantly, we want this study to result in a set of comprehensive strategies, and we envision those strategies would address things like capital improvements, like which roads should we focus on for improvement. A big part of this, we hope, will be the funding aspect. You know, we've got all this growth taking place, and that results in a pretty big need for roadway improvements, and yet there's not the funding that's set up to pay for those. And so we're hoping that the consultants can make some good solid recommendations in terms of how to increase funding opportunities. And then we want them to also look at our land use policies and our zoning ordinance and see how those might be tweaked, if at all, to kind of help with this overall issue.
So there's a big movement. I'm going to take the last item first. There's a big movement all throughout fast-growing communities to look at your land uses as in relationship to how that land can be used and how big that, maybe it's a subdivision, maybe it's some big corporation that moves, although we don't have corporations move in the unincorporated area because
right.
we can't provide that infrastructure, i.e. sewer and public utilities.
Right.
So most of our growth is, a high percentage of our growth is residential use.
Mm-hmm.
But that in itself presents challenges because you've got to balance a landowner's ability if he or she wants to sell her 100 or 200 acre tract of land. We have property rights that we have to protect, as well as the neighbor who doesn't want any new development
Right.
there.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head in terms of one of the challenges that we face, because obviously the traffic that we have and that people complain about is the result of new development, both, you know, regionally and within the unincorporated county. And you know, and people do have an expectation that they should be able to, you know, to get a reasonable return from their property when they sell it for development. And so it is a balancing act and a kind of a reconciliation between the need to preserve those property rights with also the need to understand that with development comes infrastructure costs to a community and comes some other problems. And so it is going to be a matter of looking at our overall policies and trying to balance the need to be responsible stewards and also the need to preserve property rights.
You know, when you talk about the bookends of a city and the road being used to get from point A to point B, that's totally different than the way it used to be. Most people, first of all, Williamson County over the last 20 years has helped to facilitate a lot of business coming into
Right.
the area, Cool Springs area,
Yeah.
Berry Farm, Brentwood. Those cities have designated certain areas that there is commercial real estate available. They develop it. It's office, it's retail, it's the mall, whatever that traffic could be. But as you look at people that live outside Williamson County, they use Sneed Road, they use Arno Road to come from one side of the town to go to work on the other. Now, we really do want them to come into
Right.
our town and shop and buy our products because of this state, this county is heavily involved in relying on those sales tax dollars.
Right.
But by the same token, as we had a meeting just recently talking about the road improvements we're going to make to Arno Road.
Yeah.
Out at Arno High, at the high school. And several people pointed out, don't widen the road because you'll just open up more traffic to come in from 840
Sure.
over to Highway 96, which is kind of a reversal of the way that professional planners plan. I guess there's some logic. If you widen it, there's more of them come there. But by the same token, you've got to look at safety standards.
Right.
And you've got to look at accident counts. And in the case of Arno Road, you've got two schools, one on one side of the road and one on the other, that have a lot of children on those roads, either through school buses or their own personal vehicles, and the parents and the activities. And you just can't walk away from it.
Right.
But I get where they're coming from, but that's not going to stop the folks from coming off from 840 to go to Highway 96, is it, Mike?
Well, you're right. You know, people tend to take the path of least resistance, and so when they encounter congestion on 65 or on Highway 96, they'll find an alternate route. and Arno Road is becoming an alternate route for a lot of people. You mentioned that people don't necessarily want to widen the road always, and it's not always the best solution. You can't always build yourself out of a traffic issue, but I think that kind of highlights the need that the county has to be strategic in what we do. It's not a matter of widening all the roads, I don't think, because that does tend to have some unintended consequences. But at the same time, I think the county ought to look at certain key roads where it does make sense to widen those roads and be strategic about that. And then that would need to be done in concert with a number of other strategies to tackle it from a funding standpoint and a land use standpoint.
When you think about future developments in the unincorporated area and certainly the density, the number of houses that you can have on so many acres, is a criteria that oftentimes inside those municipalities, those cities, they don't have to always worry with that because they do have public sewer.
Right.
But in the county, there's many other things we've got to take into consideration: septic tanks, field lines. But it seems to me it is wiser to think about the size of the subdivision and then go to this particular study that encourages them to help pay for the impact they bring into our roads.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And we try to do that through our existing zoning ordinance criteria. But sometimes there are limitations in what you can accomplish that way. In other words, you have to make sure that what you're requiring a developer to fund is proportional to the impact that they're going to have on the road. And so that's a challenge sometimes that every community faces, and we certainly do with our traffic studies. And that's why I think it's important through this process to develop a whole range of strategies that together kind of work toward accomplishing what we want to achieve.
So there's probably people watching this show that say, well, I'm not going to go to that public meeting, but I'd like to know more about it, or I'd like to voice my opinion. Is that possible?
It absolutely is, and we're hoping to get a lot of feedback from the community during this process, particularly now in the next few weeks. We had a couple of community meetings the first week in November, got some good input from those meetings. But what we'd love to do is get people to visit the county's website, which is williamsoncounty-tn.gov, and then from that,
very good.
Yeah, I memorized that. And then from that home page, there's a tab that you can click on that takes you to the project page for this comprehensive traffic strategy. And on that page, people can view the PowerPoint presentation that was given recently, so they can learn a little bit more about the project and about the various factors that contribute to traffic. And then there are links to a couple of surveys that people can take that will give us and the consultants some good information that we can use throughout this process.
You and I have not done a survey, but I suspect if you could get a survey put together and either take it online or just the old-fashioned snail mail it in, and we could check it off, I think we would find that traffic is the #1 culprit right now to the majority of the people.
I think you're right, and our study is focusing just on the unincorporated areas of the county, and to be honest, most of the traffic issues are occurring in the cities. But that's not to minimize what's happening in the unincorporated county. But even in the unincorporated county, I think traffic is a big issue for folks, and so we're trying to be proactive with this and maybe get a little bit ahead of the curve and try to create some strategies to address the problems that we have now, but also to prevent problems in the future.
So Mike, if you don't mind, let's give a little civics lesson here to those folks that don't deal with the things you do every day, and how the road separation is made. And by that I mean the feds and the states and their roads, and the city roads and the county roads, and who can work on what roads, and how do you create a tax base that takes care of one area and not another?
Yeah, and that's another of the big challenges is that you've got in the unincorporated county, you've got state roads and county roads, and then you've got city roads that that contribute a lot of traffic to the county roads. And so getting all those to kind of line up is sometimes difficult. What we're going to try to do through this study is identify some strategies for really all the roads in the unincorporated county. Now, dealing with some of those state road issues is a little bit more complex and challenging, but you know, hopefully we'll develop some strategies that can at least assist with those roads as well.
I remember a few years ago, 10 or 12 years ago, when your boss, Joe Horn, was so excited that we actually had city and county personnel looking at where a road, the city was looking for their long-range road major thoroughfare, that it would just come to an unincorporated area, and that would be the end of the conversation, and they just ran it there. When simultaneously, not theoretically, but we were doing our unincorporated roads, looking at county major thoroughfares, and I always thought that one day the cities would come here and the counties would be there, and we'd be 50 feet apart. Right. And if we'd have just talked and moved, we might even be able to get those roads to coexist in one single area.
Right.
But up until about 15 years ago, that wasn't done.
Right.
And it was very, very common for, we have 6 cities, for all 6 cities to have their road plans, and the county would have their road plan.
Right.
And hardly any of them ever talked. Not that we were mad at them, not that we didn't want to do that, but we each had our jurisdictional base, and thank goodness those barriers have for the most part been brought down.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it is a lot better in terms of the coordination and cooperation, and we've got a more regional, county-wide major thoroughfare plan that at least takes into account all the city projects as well. There are opportunities to do even better from a coordination standpoint, but we have come a long way from where we were.
I think compounding some of the issues that you're going to be dealing with in this comprehensive traffic study that you're doing is that we already know that our community is one of the fastest growing counties and the communities in the entire state, and maybe in the southeast.
Yeah.
And that requires a lot of school buildings for education. We were recently told by the school superintendent that over the next 5 years, you can expect to see 10,000 more children in 5 years.
Right.
And you can expect to see nearly 20,000 more children in 10 years. Well, we've got 38,000 students now, and to think that you're going to add 10 and 20,000 more children over the next 10 short years,
right.
2026, 2027, 28, we're going to have to build a lot of school buildings. We're going to have to plan. They're going to have to make some of the schools a little bit larger to accept some of those kids. But it's interesting to me. It's very difficult to find land for schools that are on major thoroughfares. They're usually on the back, what I call the back 40.
Right, yeah.
And then you put a school in and you create a traffic problem.
Sure.
And as hard as we try to encourage, and I think we are getting better, all personnel to talk, oftentimes that's the only place that you can find land
right.
that will satisfy all of these subdivisions, because when it comes to schools, other than the Franklin Special School District and their K through 8, every other kid, every other child has to go to school, and they wind up in the Williamson County Public School
right.
System.
Yeah.
So it's a real challenge with what you've got before you.
It is, and it's a complex issue, and just as the issue of traffic has a lot of factors involved, there can't be a single solution, and so that's why we feel like this multifaceted approach to identifying a range of strategies is going to be really critical for us.
Mike, we've got about 3 minutes left on this show, and I'm sure I have overlooked something that you wanted to discuss or bring to the forefront. And I do encourage people that are watching this show to either call my office, 615-790-5700, call your office, go to the website, put a letter in the mail, give us your 2 cents. Not that traffic is bad, we know that.
Right.
We're working on that. But if you've got some solutions and ideas, we're welcome. We do welcome that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You know, at this stage, we would invite people to, again, visit the website, take the survey. If they have specific comments about the project or specific ideas, you know, by all means, you know, email those to me, or there's some other contacts on the website. And then I'd also encourage people to just continue to keep track of this project, because we're still fairly early on. From here, the consultants are going to be taking all the information that they've gathered, all their evaluation of these issues, and begin to develop some draft, or at least some potential strategies that the county should consider. And then probably in the winter time, we'll go back and have a couple more community meetings and present those potential strategies and get feedback on those. And then they'll refine those, work with the county commission and planning commission. And then hopefully we'll have a finalized comprehensive traffic strategy in place by spring of 2017.
So when you look into your crystal ball, what do you see out there for 10, 15, 20 years? As far as not just traffic, but Williamson County unincorporated area.
Yeah. Well, the main thing that I think is important is that we look to what makes us special in the first place, and our comprehensive plan suggests that you know, growth is good, as everybody knows, but we have to be smart about it. And so what I envision in the next 10 years is that we'll continue to be smart about it and focus the development where it makes sense, where the infrastructure can support it. We've got large areas of the county that are still fairly rural, and we hear that people are that they really value that kind of rural character. And so our job, I think, is going to be to accommodate the growth that we know is going to take place, do it in a way that enhances our character, that the roadway infrastructure can support it, while still preserving the rural areas that people hold so dear.
When you really think about the uniqueness of Williamson County, some data that I have recently received, say in the last year or two, indicates that we probably still got over 50% of our land mass that in some way could continue to be developed, but we don't want to do that. And we got individual communities like Leapers Ford, we're working on College Grove, the Grassland areas that say these are how we want to be different and unique than this community.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of input that we really need. If you're watching this, you're out in the unincorporated area, tell us what you want, where you live, and let us put all this on a piece of paper and start figuring out how to handle it even better in the future.
Absolutely.
You've been talking to Williamson County's planner, who has got an unbelievable job balancing all of this. Mike, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Good luck in your journey on this, and hope you get a lot of comments.
Thank you very much.
I'm Rogers Anderson. We'll see you around the county on the next show. Have a good day.